This podcast deals with themes, languages, and situations that may not be suitable for young audiences. If you're under the age of 18, parental guidance isn't going to help you here. Welcome to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. My name's Trisha.
My name is Jobim.
And I am Kai.
And we're back for another week of Now Open. I missed y'all, especially you, Kai.
Oh,
you weren't with us last week.
So much. Yeah, it was a hectic week last week. But I'm here now.
What was your week like? What happened to you?
Last week, let's not talk about that. But then let's talk about the weekend. I celebrated with my girlfriend. It was such a fun. I finally was able to pull off my very first successful surprise. So I'm very proud of that. Because I'm horrible at surprises. I'm horrible.
Because you're bad at
ruin my own
secrets.
Yes, I'm horrible at keeping. I'm horrible at surprising myself. Where it's like people would surprise me, and I try to figure out what they're surprising me with. Or when I surprise someone, I'd often kind of just blow it up even before it happens. So for me to successfully pull off a surprise is huge for me. So I'm really proud of that. That was good about the weekend.
Congratulations. What about you, Jobim? What have you been up to?
Tried to watch Justice League.
I like how you tried.
I know. I didn't stop watching it because it was horrible or anything. To the contrary, I was enjoying it very, very much. But it is a 4-hour-long movie, and I think I started watching it at 8 p.m.
Bad idea.
And I was just like, oh, amazing.
Was this the black and white Snyder cut?
It wasn't black and white. It's the 4-hour Snyder cut.
Because he recently released a black and white one after releasing the 4-hour one, and he was like, this is the definitive cut. And everyone's just like, oh God, are you for reals? How many definitive director's cuts are there gonna be?
Yeah, because the other Snyder cut was released in a different aspect ratio than other movies are filmed in. It was 4:3 or something like that.
CRT, let's go.
Yeah. It was weird. But I mean, I liked it. I did like it. I find myself more and more having to defend difficult directors, and I don't know what that says about myself.
Well, Zack Snyder is a whole different issue. I personally think he shouldn't make any more movies, but that's me.
How was your weekend, Trisha?
It was pretty good. I actually went out on a bike on the road with other vehicles for the first time over the weekend, and it was terrifying. I don't understand how anybody cycles here as transportation because everyone's out to kill you. I had quite a few close calls, and most of them were Jeeps or motorcycles.
Oh,
but
no.
I'm alive. I'm here so far. And I'm really happy about my progress with the biking because I'm an uncoordinated, panicky person. So the fact that I can go to the corner store or the pharmacy and grab some shit is huge. It's huge.
The corner store and the pharmacy. What, do you live in the 50s?
The apothecary.
Buy some saltwater taffy down by the boardwalk.
I wish I could. All right, so let's get on with the show. We have a weekly segment that we like to do here where we talk about all the other things that are happening outside in the world because the conversations that we're having here on the podcast are not happening in a vacuum. There's real impact to the things we talk about. So this is this week's newsstand. Jobim, take it away.
Multiple studies have found that the pandemic disproportionately impacts women who have taken on a larger burden of childcare with schools closed and been more likely to suffer job losses, while domestic violence has also risen. A lack of women in decision-making positions will only exacerbate that inequality. It is inconceivable that we can address the most discriminatory crisis we have ever experienced without full engagement of women, according to a representative. I want to say representative. At the moment, men have given themselves the. That sounds stupid, though. Representative of women. I don't know. At the moment, men have given themselves the impossible task of making the right decisions about women without the benefit of women's insights. This study found that 32 countries failed to factor gender into their recovery policies and programs at all. Now, this is going to sound a little dumb of me, but I didn't even consider gender politics when it comes to like the recovery and employing policies for the workforce. How did COVID negatively affect women?
So
and what are some of the special things that we need to address about the women in our workforce?
Given the lockdown, for example, it's been shown that domestic violence cases have been rising all over the world. And, that's really just one of the things that one of the ways gender comes into play in the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, gender-based violence is one of the things at the very, very end of the spectrum, but also like women have different needs in times of pandemics. There's this thing that they call double burden. At least before the pandemic, there's this thing they call the double burden, where women would have to work at home, take care of the clothes, take care of the food, take care of the kids. At the same time, they'd have to go out and work to get money. But you see that double burden in the sense now, when you come home, it's still women who do the work at home, the unpaid work at home. And that's not something that's true for a lot of men.
Especially with distance learning, right? So with distance learning, kids are at home, and who does the majority of the burden of childcare fall on? Women, typically mothers.
Exactly.
So now that their kids are at home, they don't even have the break of their kids being at school anymore. They're just on the clock pretty much 24/7.
And like even the pandemic exacerbated these gender issues precisely because Trisha said they're at home, and even though it seems more likely that men, now that they're all at home, all share the burden, but the gender norms that are at its baseline kind of push towards that idea now. Still, women have to do the housework. Still, women have to do the childcare. And even though there's some men, some parents, some fathers might like share in the childcare and the housework, it's not the most normal thing or normative thing that is out there. So I guess what this new segment is trying to say is that we can't have people who don't know what it's like for example, like men. You can't have a majority of men ruling decisions that affect women's lives.
And I found this other statistic in The Lancet. An estimated 740 million women are employed in the informal economy. And in developing nations, it's more than 2/3 of female employment. So the informal economy would be unregistered sellers, usually street vendors, domestic helpers, house workers, and a lot of these jobs are largely female driven. So now that you can't just go around cleaning people's houses anymore because of the pandemic, then these people have lost jobs. And there's also a really big crackdown on street markets, a majority of which are female sellers. And where do these people go? Where this has been their livelihood for years, but because of the pandemic, street markets are no longer allowed. So what do you do? So a lot of these women-led businesses and female-run industries are super, super suffering. All right.
Exactly.
And we have not been doing a good job here in the Philippines containing the pandemic, despite what our government likes to think or delude themselves with. So unfortunately, it seems like women are going to keep getting the short end of the stick to come for months to come. So fuck you, Philippine government. That's an official now open stance.
Every episode we have a new official now open stance.
they're all pretty consistent. It's very fuck.
They are.
Fuck
They
Duterte,
are.
fuck Duque, fuck everyone right there, especially the men. All right. Well, that's it for this week's newsstand. Stay tuned till next week to learn more about what's going on in the world. So, this is the part of the podcast where we like to promote other people who are creating things during the pandemic because, we all need the support, and it's totally free to support an artist. So, for this upcoming clip, we have a very special audio sample from one of our previous episode guests. This one is Big Shot by Coates. Why did you get so shy? Well, last you were so bold when you told me she'd replace me. Guess luck would have me leave that spot. Big shot. High on fame, you're mixing with this cooler crowd. Oh wow, what's her name? And why do all her friends all talk so loud? And that was Big Shot by Coates. You can stream that right now on Spotify, but don't do it right now because you're still listening to this podcast. All right. So if you want us to promote your stuff, or if you have a friend who's doing some amazing work and you want to signal boost them, you can actually drop us a line on our Discord channel. So a couple of promotions have actually already come through there. So if you want us to promote your stuff or a friend's stuff, just hang out on our Discord. We're also there random times throughout the week. Today I streamed Left 4 Dead, and we just get together for regular hangouts and stuff, and you can ask us questions there as well. I'm going to leave the link to the Discord in the comments so you can join when the show's over. All right, so I just want to say hi to the few people who are watching here tonight. We have Trisha, Ruth, and Chi. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have a jam-packed episode for you. Very, very educational, care of our resident UN ambassador, Kai. So Kai, why don't you tell us what we're talking about tonight?
All right. So I want to ask you guys before I start, have you guys heard of the term SRHR?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it stands for sexual health, reproductive health. Right?
Okay. Well,
SHRH.
No,
health
no,
reproductive.
that's all right.
No, is that not what it stands for?
You were very close.
80% is good enough for me.
But what from what you do know about it, like what are the things that you've heard about it? What are the things that
okay, you were not here last episode for this, but I shared this last time. I remember one thing, okay, about my like sex education classes in high school. We had a sex educator come to school and give us a talk. Mm-hmm. And they said that one of the reasons that there's so many like why the urban poor reproduce at a high rate is because they use toothpaste as contraceptive, because like they slather it on, because they've seen in commercials that the toothpaste kills like bacteria. And so they're like, if it's strong enough to kill bacteria, it must be strong enough to kill sperm. So they use Colgate as contraceptive, and I never fucking bothered to double check with anybody whether that's true or not. I just heard that as a kid, and I've like believed that my entire life. So every time people talk about like reproductive health, that's the one thing I have in my back pocket. I'm like, poor people use Colgate on their ding dongs.
That sounds really terrible, really painful, but I will agree that sperm is like a bacteria in the sense that you don't want it near you. Just kidding.
I don't want it. But yeah, so SRHR, Jobim, stands for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. So this...
You're very close.
Very close. No, because like when I first started learning about this, it was also like a tongue twister for me to get like to get the entire like acronym into like words. So I'd always just stick to SRHR. I remember when I started learning about this, I started like writing about this. I couldn't even like put together the words, so I just keep saying SRHR because I didn't really know how to put them together. So it's totally understandable. I totally get it.
There's just
these
too
are
many ends in this title.
there's so many
acronym.
ends, right? It's like just stick to SRHR. That's all you need to know. But these are existing human rights that encompass the physical, mental, and social well-being of all persons that are related to sexual and reproductive functions and processes. So it's not just about your right to have sex, which we do have. It also encompasses the sexual act, the mental aspects of the sexual act, and the social well-being of people, or the relationships that come about in terms of your reproductive and your sexual lives. It has to do with what surrounds sex and reproduction. So, according to the Gutenberg Lancet report in 2018, SRHR covers first your sexual rights. So that's your agency over your sexuality. It's your power to define, to choose, and to decide on issues of your sexuality. So,
okay, I have a question.
Who do you want to have sex? Go ahead.
I often hear about people have sexual rights. You have sexual rights that everyone is entitled to. But I'm not exactly sure what my sexual rights are, right?
Right.
Are they like a set of how many are there? Are there a set number? Are they like the commandments where I have, is it like the Declaration of Independence where there's like a list of them,
Right.
or where can I find my sexual rights?
Right. So sexual rights aren't exactly like, it's more of a development term than it is a legal term. As I'll talk about later, the RH law in the Philippines covers more of your reproductive rights. So more of like your family reproductive rights have to do with your choices of family planning, whereas reproductive health is more of like your access to these family planning methods. So that's what kind of the RH law focuses on. But the RH law, it kind of passes over sexual rights, and your sexual rights are basically the ability to decide on your own sexuality. So according to the Gutenberg Lancet report, it states that your sexual rights have to do with, first, your choice of sexual partners, second, your decision of whether and when to be sexually active, and third, the freedom to define your own SOGI, which we talked about before, was sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So those are your sexual rights. It's mostly about the ability for you to decide on issues of your sexuality. As I said,
so basically you're independent when it comes to these aspects of like sex in your life.
Right. And the thing with right. And then, the thing with SRHR is that these are already existing human rights. Like these are already like stipulated in the Declaration of Human Rights, and they have been further refined in the Yoga Carta principles. But the problem is a lot of countries and a lot of leaders in countries they tend to, I don't know how to say it mean, like they tend to impinge, or they tend to like
the rules.
They tend to really like weigh down on sexual rights, reproductive rights. So the thing is that a lot of people in the development world would kind of are now in the conversation about how to make SRHR more manifest in legal bodies. So more than sexual rights, it's also about your reproductive rights. And your reproductive rights is control over reproductive freedom. So it's about your decision about when to marry, who to marry, whether you want to marry. It's also about having kids, whether, when, and by what means do you want to have children. Do you want to have kids? When do you want to have kids? Do you want to have kids via IVF, in vitro fertilization, like through a test tube, or do you want to do it the regular way? How many children do you want to have? That's reproductive rights. So if sexual rights is more about deciding about your sexuality, reproductive rights is more of having the right to decide about the more legal aspects of your sexuality. So children and marrying.
Okay, got it.
And then more than that, SRHR also covers your your sexual health. So that's, as I said earlier, the physical, mental, and social well-being in terms of sexuality. So the Gutenberg Lancet report kind of just really lists all of this down, and then it kind of just covers every aspect of SRHR. So in terms of sexual health, that's more about having respect and safe and pleasurable experiences. So having your privacy, your autonomy respected, na parang your bodily integrity, like having the right to own your body, having the right to do what you want with your body. And the thing with this is that it goes farther than just sex, in the sense now, for example, like recently, like the SRHR talks about how in terms of your body, you have a sexual right to bodily integrity, right? Recently, my someone close to me had like had this dilemma of where she wanted to get treated for cancer, and she chose to go to Singapore. But the person that was funding all this was saying, no, you have to go to the US or else I won't pay for it. And that right there is going against your bodily autonomy, going against the sexual right to bodily autonomy. And I remember like talking this person it's quite old. So I was telling her, I was like, you have the right to your body. You should be able to do what you want with your body regardless of like like where the funding is coming from. But that's kind of like also one of the sad things about SRHR, the fact that we have these rights and we have all of these things surrounding that are available to us, but a lot of people in power tend to take them away from us, and that's kind of what a lot of development workers and a lot of activists are fighting for, and fighting against rather, having the right to practice these rights and having the right to really know these rights and practice these rights.
Okay,
Lastly,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
If there are sexual and reproductive rights, okay, because I know that as a citizen, I have rights, but as a citizen, I also enjoy privileges. Are there sexual and reproductive privileges, and what are the differences between sexual and reproductive rights and privileges?
Yeah, because as they said, these things are rights. What I was just talking about, these are rights, but they are being treated as though they are privileges. Gets ba? Na parang, we have the right to bodily integrity. I mean that's stated in that's a human right. Na parang, more, for example, free speech, that's a right. But when we see it in practice, it becomes a privilege for certain people. So the issue there, I think, is more of these rights are supposed to be awarded to everyone just because they're human. That's the whole point of human rights, diba? Na you have these rights simply because they're human. That's the whole baseline of it. But we know that's not true, mainly because of the different structures we have in society. We have patriarchy, we have capitalism, we have all these different structures in society that kind of just say, no, these rights are only for a few people, which is why it becomes a privilege. Because people in power take these rights and say, only we can have them. You can't. So that's how it becomes a sense of privilege. Because these rights have been kind of gatekept. Gets ba?
I love how you mentioned capitalism as one of the systems that really impinges on everyone's rights, not just sexually, but in other ways, but specifically sexually. Because when we say that a lot of access to safe and quality healthcare, access to abortion, etc., these are things that are not allowed here, or they're in limited scope. So the only people who can access these rights are people who can pay to access them. whether locally in the form of like buying birth control or going abroad to get an abortion, a legal abortion.
Yes, exactly. Like, in terms of abortion or like even just contraceptive use in general. Like I remember I had sex with someone, condom broke, he came inside me, and I was like what, 18? I was not ready to be a mother. And I knew that I just finished my I'm like, fuck dude. Tang ina, bro. Ano na? So what happened was like buti na lang, I was in the US at the time. So if given that I was in the US, we drove to the nearest CVS, I grabbed plan B, and I was fine. But I remember that instance really made me think, and if this happened to me in the Philippines, what would happen to me? And then got me thinking, this is a reality for so many people in the Philippines, where it's like, shit, the condom broke. Tangina, anong gagawin ko? Because, and like that's it's
tell
just
me
sad
about
reality. But you're blessed with a beautiful child. You're blessed with a beautiful child.
I love him. I wouldn't trade him for anything in the world. But something has to be done about our reproductive health here.
Yeah, it definitely does, dude. Holy shit. Because imagine, Jobim, if you were like, if you and Janine were like 16, would this be an okay situation? Like, gets mo ba? Parang,
honestly, you know what? It wouldn't have been. I mean, even now, it wouldn't have been. We're just making the most of, and we love him. We wouldn't trade him. If Juro, if you're listening to this episode in the future, we wouldn't trade you for anything in the world. We love you, but we would have liked to have that option.
Yes.
Right. That wasn't even on the table for us. It wasn't even something that we could consider. It was just like, oh, the decision has been made for us. And as adults, we kind of felt powerless that we weren't even able to make that decision for ourselves.
Right. And that's a term we call biological determinism, where it's like your biology is kind of your destiny, and that's that whole idea of biological determinism is so ingrained not just in society but even in our laws. Now, for example, like women's bodies, diba? You can't have an abortion, you can't have like emergency contraceptives. So at the end of the day, all because like you wanna practice like safe reproductive measures, but you can't because our laws don't allow it, even though you have the RH law, sure. But you have the RH law. But then, for example, the RH law has parental consent. Now, you have to tell your parents, like, hey, mom, I need some birth control because I had sex last night. Not every kid wants to have that. I mean, I don't think any kid wants to have that conversation, especially with a boomer parent. And plus, like, the RH law even has this thing where it's like, you can only give contraceptives to a minor if she's already had an abortion or if she's already given birth.
What?
So it's like, yeah. So it's like, what's the point?
No prevention at all.
No, dude. Like, the preventive measure is you have to have like a parent come with you. Either have a parent come with you and get the contraceptives, or you're already fucked up so you can get the contraceptives already. That's what.
That's like saying welcome to the hospital where we only operate on people who are dead.
Honestly,
exactly.
We're like 30 minutes into this, and already it's so obvious how our government has pretty much the same response to any kind of health crisis. And I would consider the lack of accessible sex education, contraceptives, etc., a health crisis. It is a crisis because our teenage pregnancy rates are ridiculous. Our child rape rates are ridiculous. Everything's ridiculous here. And they have no care for prevention at all. They're just like, well, get to it. And then when we get to it, you have no more choice.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not even teenage pregnancies anymore. It's adolescent pregnancies now. Like we have 10-year-old mothers. Like there have been cases of 10-year-old mothers. And it has been shown, like statistics have shown that like most young girls who are getting pregnant, the fathers are often older than them, much older than them. So, like that says a lot. Like, why are all these young girls getting pregnant, but why is it that the fathers are not their age? Why are they always a lot older? I don't want to make assumptions.
Men are perverts.
But it looks fucking ugly. You know what I mean?
We can make that assumption.
It's a fair assumption to make.
All right. So what other so obviously abortion is a really big SRHR topic, which let's just get this clear to everybody who's listening. I'm pretty sure you're aware of this if you're listening. Obviously, abortion is not legal in the country. Many people, if they want to have a legal abortion, they have to go to other countries. Thailand was very popular for a time. I don't know, like I just felt like every time I heard like abortion, it was always Thailand. So we don't have abortion here.
But
we do. Yeah. Yes.
Post-abortive care is possible to get. We don't have abortion here, but to get post-abortive care, you can get that.
Yes. Of course, we're not saying that no abortions happen in the Philippines. That is a straight up lie.
A lot of abortions.
There's a lot of abortions. They're just not legal, which makes them really, really dangerous.
It's fairly easy to buy abortion pills here in the Philippines, but you know, according to the doctors that I've spoken, like, you know, my peers were doctors, because I asked them about, you know, like, does anybody ever come into the hospital and be like, hey, I had a botched abortion, can you get, how often does that happen? And they were like, it does happen every once in a while, because the people that get it don't have the right information. They take it wrong. The pills that are available to us here are not effective. So I hear these horror stories about women bleeding out because they don't have the proper care here, or because they were too scared because it's illegal. You know, a lot of people are like, am I going to go to jail if I go to the hospital because of complications due to my abortion? Am I, you know, there are women who are scared to even go to the gynecologist because their gynecologist is a little older and afraid that they're going to get judged by their gynecologist. What more a botched fucking abortion? You know, how hard do you think you're going to get judged at a hospital in a Catholic country?
Oh yeah, no, that's really madness. Like, I would go in for just like regular run-of-the-mill bacterial infections, and the amount of slut shaming I got from that was ridiculous. I can't imagine what it's like for people who have needed abortions, or especially post-abortion care. And yeah, you were mentioning like the abortion pill, right? It is easy to get, not the abortion pill, like the pill that they give to you in the States when you want an early term abortion. But you know, the pills that we have here that people know about, they're not even an abortion pill. They're technically two separate pills that when taken together, they can cause miscarriage. So it's not even the actual abortion pill. It's just a cocktail of drugs that hopefully has the side effect.
And hopefully they dislodge.
Like you have to be mad scientist in order to practice your SRHR. Like how fucked up is that?
Yeah.
Aren't we like the only? No, not the only country. I was going to say, are we the only country without abortion? I'm not sure. Are we?
To put things into perspective, I mean, people might be like, "What's the big deal?" To put things into perspective, this would kind of be like the Wild West, where if you wanted to have a tooth extracted, you needed to go to your barber, you know, who didn't really specialize in extracting teeth to get your teeth pulled. You know what I mean? The systems that you need for healthy procedures just aren't in place. And it's kind of like we're in the Wild West when it comes to our SRHR in that sense.
Totally. And I think the Philippines is especially ripe for this kind of conversation because I can't remember the exact statistic. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it on a previous episode, but it was something like more than a third of pregnancies in the Philippines are unwanted, and more than half are unplanned. So we obviously have a huge fucking problem here because you don't have any access to abortion. But if you don't, how do you protect yourself from even getting to the point where you need an abortion, because we can't get it here? So you would need contraceptives, right? And sex education. Right. And we have barely any. I'm being nice with the barely any. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Hello, Colgate nga eh, di ba?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with this access to contraceptives is there's a lot of just misinformation around it, because the thing with the RH law, even though it has that parental consent problem, it's a good law. Like, you see RH support for adolescents, there's reproductive health care, there's even the mental health aspect of reproductive health, but it doesn't cover for example, like how do, for example, LGBTQ plus couples, how do they plan for their families? How do they go on with contraceptive use, diba? Because like contraceptives aren't just for getting away from pregnancies. There's a lot of health benefits to contraceptives as well. There is, you can use them. For example, I used it for PCOS because I had polycystic ovary syndrome, and it was and birth control was one of the things that helped me get through the symptoms. More than that, it's also good for your skin. But there's a lot of benefits to contraceptives. But the fact that there's just so much like mystery around it, so much conversation we're not having around it is what the problem is, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really
Mhm.
interesting how a lot of people here, there is still no consensus, even online, if you need a prescription to get contraceptives from Mercury or Watson's or something.
No, you
Now,
don't, dude. Like I bought Diane
You-
from my girlfriend like so many times.
yeah, the reason why there's no consensus, and I agree with you, I have never needed a prescription in my entire life, but apparently some pharmacies do ask for prescriptions, and it's not even like a blanket policy across all mercury drugs. For example, like one mercury drug won't accept it without a
Yeah.
prescription, and then one will. So before, when I was rejected for birth control, I just went to another one and I got my birth control easily. So people have had varying experiences with how to access birth control, and so many of them think you need a prescription because they've been asked before. And this is, if you do need a prescription, then that means you have to go to a doctor. So there's an extra cost. Trust cost 50 pesos or 47 last I checked. But like a physician's fee or whatever is like at least 500 or something. And then you have to get over the shame of going to the doctor, and you have to find a doctor who will give you birth control. It's basically the access to contraceptives. It's just, there's a paywall, a huge paywall, and nobody knows what's up. Like, can I not have a prescription? Do I need one? Where can I get it? It's ridiculous. There's no consensus.
Hannah says
Definitely.
Plan
So,
B
like-
is not available in the Philippines, right? No, it's not, Hannah.
Nope.
No, it's not, Hannah.
No,
but
not at all.
I don't know if we're gonna get taken off Facebook or whatever by the government here, but we will talk about this more in detail in a safe sex episode. But there is a sort of Plan B that you can buy here. It's not called Plan B, but it's made of basically the same ingredients. So what you want to look for is you want to look for birth control that has, I will fuck this up, levonorgestrel. Levonorgestrel. I'll just leave it in the comments because I cannot pronounce it. That is the active ingredient in Plan B, and it is available in other birth control like Nordet and Trust. So if you can't find Plan B, Nordet, or Trust, if you can find that, then that's pretty much the same thing. But that's not all that there is to it. You can check out my Twitter for a full thread on how to use Trust as Plan B, and we'll talk about this in detail in a future episode for sure.
So more than contraceptives, another aspect of SRHR that is denied or restricted in many parts of the world, including the Philippines, is comprehensive sex ed. Just a few weeks ago, I was at a seminar for adolescent SRHR, and some person from Dep Ed was there. They were talking about how, they're training educators in how to give comprehensive sex education. But okay, my question was, given that the RH law is already so Catholic in the sense that, first off, we have the strictest abortion laws in the world, some of the strictest abortion laws in the world, and that the parental consent thing, where it says na a minor could only get family planning contraceptives only if they've had a miscarriage or if they're already a parent. Like this heavily reflects like Catholic shit, So given that our government's doing that, I asked, like, what kind of sex ed? Like, what kind of sex ed are we teaching these children? Are we telling them? And it's been proven, abstinence-based sex ed does not work. That's already been proven. So I asked them, like, what's the proof?
This country is such proof.
Exactly, right? Like you keep telling these kids, don't have sex, but how many kids are getting pregnant? You know, I asked like, what kind of sex ed are we teaching these kids? Abstinence, is that the only way to go, or are we empowering students to make informed choices? You see, like there's a difference between it's easy to say that the government is giving us sex ed, but it's harder to figure out like, what kind of sex ed are we giving these kids. Because my sex ed growing up was more like we were shown this video of this woman who was like, there was a woman, she was raped, she had a baby, that was me. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, yeah, dude. And I was like,
that's true. I was the baby.
Yeah, dude. She was raped. She got pregnant and she didn't give it up. And now I'm the baby. And I'm like, what the fuck? And like, she was talking about how all these different STIs you could get and through different types of sexual intercourse. And the entire time, like my prof was like, my teacher at the time was like, you guys are gems. This is why you should not have sex. You guys are gems. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm a gem. But at the end of the day, I still had sex. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, you can't tell people not to have sex because it's a normal thing to do.
It's terrifying and dangerous, but also how each and every one of you got here. Don't do it. Don't do sex.
So super fun, but it's not for you. Yeah, like I remember my sex ed. The earliest sex ed I can remember was in 5th grade. We talked, not really sex ed. It's just more like, this is a penis and its various parts, and you have to fill in the blanks and name the different parts. The testes, the ganyan. And then that was it. And then when I got to high school, that's when they really started drilling down the abstinence only education. I remember watching a video of someone giving birth and the camera angle was right in front of the vagina. Like, I'm like, who the fuck is this woman?
I mean, that'll fucking do it. That'll, if you want.
You see the baby crowning and she's screaming. And honestly, that really turned me off heterosexual sex, but that was fine because I was a lesbian. So it worked out for me. I was still banging my batchmate, but like
I think it was meant to turn us off, like wanting to have sex because like, oh, you don't want to go through this. But it just turned me off watching videos of women giving birth. Really, that's all.
Right. And doesn't that whole idea na don't do this make you more curious? It's more like the more you tell kids not to do something, the more they're gonna, at least with me, it was like the more they told me don't do this, I was like, I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna go do it. Just because he told me not to.
You know what? When you put it, especially when it comes to kids who are, their whole fucking deal is exploring the world and breaking boundaries and pushing the envelope, right? That's what kids do. And when you put the stigma around sex is like, like it's something that should be whispered in the shadows, even if they're not doing it maliciously, because they know that there is a stigma around it. When kids are alone and they start, like, I'll touch your nipple. They're not doing it. They're not doing it as like, I'm fucking,
they just know it's a bawal part.
Yeah, exactly. They just know it's bawal, and they're like, and it just leads to them discovering sex in through a framework that is not mature. Through and they're hiding it from people now because they think it's something to be hidden, and they've explored something that they thought was taboo. They've discovered something like, ooh, that tingles, and now they're not going to talk to anybody about it.
They are.
So now they're going to try to learn more about it themselves. And that's just going to lead to more and more misinformation. And you pass on the conventional wisdom that you've learned from yourself, and that's how the misinformation spreads.
Exactly. And more than that, like, because we don't have accessible and credible sources of information that are provided by the government or even families for that matter, kids turn to the media. And often that's porn. And although porn is not necessarily the worst thing, it for someone who's learning about sex, for someone who's trying to figure out how does sex look like, how should sex feel like,
I do think porn is the worst thing for somebody who is discovering what
exactly.
for the kind of person that we're talking about right now. I think
children.
Porn is the absolute worst thing. Porn is great for somebody who knows how to use porn. For somebody who knows that, that's why we have like ratings on movies like are 18 or PG-13 is because we know that the audiences that are of a certain age are old enough to appreciate or understand what they're watching.
Right.
And kids learning to discover sex shouldn't be doing it through porn, because that's for like like advanced level shit. That's for like when you know what you're looking for. Don't learn it through porn.
Yeah, porn gives you a lot of harmful ideas, but when you have nowhere else to turn to, I turned to porn when I was younger. I mean, I had other resources. Wikipedia was great. My search history was just cunnilingus. Wikipedia, cunnilingus. But I turned to porn for a majority of my sexual exploration, and I had to unlearn so many terrible things later on. I mean, there is a rating for porn. It's 18 plus. There is a rating, but it's so easy to get past those.
Yeah.
Like you just put a fake birthday,
exactly.
And
you just click that little button. I am over 18.
Right.
Exactly. And for younger kids who just read, like Jubib said, they're just starting out, figuring out like how does this whole sex thing work. To have these ideas that sex should be this rough. Sex should be like, my dick should be like just poking the back of her throat all the time. Like,
oh my God, yeah.
Those, the ideas that. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, when you have a child looking through porn and they have zero guidance, they are gonna look at every fucking category known to mankind, and they're gonna see some hardcore, awful, rapey, BDSM shit. They can't comprehend it.
Like a healthy relationship with sex after learning about it through porn is like expecting to be a doctor after watching all 17 seasons of Grey's Anatomy. It's just not going to happen.
It's a great analogy. I love it.
That is true. I remember I saw this ad. I think it was from New Zealand. I forgot which country, but then like this ad where it was like, so there were these two like porn star looking people, like two naked people walk up to like a house. They knock on the door. They're like, "Hi, are you blah blah's mom?" And then she's like, "Oh yeah, who are you guys?" And the two people were like, "Oh, we're the porn stars that he's watching on his screen. We came here to tell him not to watch us. We came here to tell him not to watch us on the screen right now, because what we do isn't real. It's really for older people." Parang ganun yung ad. Na parang it was showing na parang like, and then the kid walked out, and then the two partners were like, "Hi, we're here. Watch us." Parang ganun yung type of ad na parang super fun, super playful, but the message was like, you have to make sure kids don't learn about these things through porn.
Yeah.
And like, my God, sana all. Like, sana we had something like that. Like, the SRHR campaigns we have here are so fucking stupid. Like, we had this one from DOH, I think, called Gaga Girl and Bobo Boy. Where it was
I remember that.
Yeah, dude, where it was like, hindi ako yeah, it was like a cheerleading thing, and they were singing, and it was like, hindi ako Gaga Girl, hindi ako pabuntis, hindi ako madapa. And Bobo Boy was like, hindi ako Bobo Boy, hindi ako makipagtalik, or some shit like that, dude. It was some stupid shit. Is this really it? Like you're gonna tell us not to have sex through a cheerleading video that just has to do with abstinence? Like these things.
What I don't understand is, I mean, these people are the officials, I'm assuming, who are behind the policies that are being made, these campaigns, these asinine campaigns. We're children once, right? We all went through puberty and we all explored our sexuality. Don't they know that this kind of abstinence training doesn't work? I don't know what goes through their minds when they're like brainstorming these things, like, yes, Bobo Boy and Gaga Girl. Kids are really gonna fucking respond to this shit.
Well, I don't want to play devil's advocate because God knows the devil doesn't need one. But I think I kind of understand where they're coming from. Bobo Boy, Gaga Girl was stupid AF. I don't understand that at all. But the fact that they want to protect the kids, like, did you realize, like, the older we got, and then you see kids online, and you're like, protect the children shouldn't be here.
Yes.
You're very kids don't go here. You kind of have this, that you were a child, and exactly how it affected you. So you're kind of more like, oh God. But then because of that, sometimes we forget exactly what children
and you tend to reproduce. You tend to reproduce the problem, no? Like, I feel like it's more like you're like, going back to what you guys were saying, Brian, I think it's more like, how do we tackle the issue now that we know this, but at the same time still be able to have that protectiveness over the kid. Gets mo ba? Parang protect the kids, but at the same time, like, don't do what they used to do. but it's such a hard like paradox to kind of figure out because like you really want to protect them, but at the same time you know that the past methods don't work, but those are the only methods you know have like that. Those are the only methods you know. So I think going back to what Trisha was saying, it's like they want to help, I guess, but at the same time they don't know what else to do because that's the only thing that's ever been done.
Also, they're adults, so they're not affected by any of these policies. So they're not exactly incentivized to make them better. Because I remember when this
until their kids are knocked up.
But then but the people who are making these policies, they have the money to get their kids abortions in the US. So, they're not affected at all. So when I was, I remembered when the RH bill, when it was still a bill, came out, a lot of people were worried about specifically the comprehensive sex education part. They were fine with the whole family planning because we already have sort of shadows of that from before the RH bill. But it was really the comprehensive sex ed that a lot of people were scared about because they're like, we're teaching children about sex now, like that was the worry. It's like, isn't it going to make them want to have sex more? And like, dude, do you remember
this the internet's job?
Or actually what they were saying is it's the parents' job. But the thing is, the same people who are saying it's the parents' job are conservative and they will never talk to their children about it. So it was more of an issue of when does government action impinge on the right of a parent to teach their child stuff. So instead of doing comprehensive sex ed in schools, they were pushing for, make it the family's choice. And this was the same conversation that was happening in the States. Make it the family's choice. But, if we leave it to the Filipino families with boomer or even like late Gen X parents who have only known abstinence-only education and are extremely religious, then we're going to be back maybe even worse than what we're doing now.
Here's the thing that I don't understand about that. Is that the health, reproductive health isn't like religion where, it's we're being discriminated against and therefore you have to have freedom of religion. And that's why, it's free for parents to teach them. And, schools, you can send your child to a school that is non-secular, but sex, that applies to everybody, and it's not, I don't understand why we have to leave it up to the parents when the parents themselves are not educated about sex. It's like saying, well, why don't we just leave the parents to teach them about fucking math then? Why don't we leave the parents to teach them about fucking science? Why send them to school? Let's not teach them anything. If we're going to pick and choose which parts of vital daily life information we're going to disseminate with our kids, then maybe we shouldn't be sending them to school in the first place, because we're removing essential knowledge that they should be learning under the guise of like, I don't want to talk to my kids about that. That's icky,
Right. But something that's good though is that like in 2014 there was a study by Labella, and she found that the perceptions of the of the RH law, especially sexuality education implementation, were very positive. Now, a few were against the RH law, only opposed it because they lacked an understanding of what the act or what the law was. So the vast majority of respondents in her study from all age, sex, socioeconomic status, religions were in accordance with one another when it came to the RH law, having a positive vision for the change in the Philippines. So if you think about it, given that this study was like she sampled from different cities in Manila and outside of Manila, and found that most people were kind of like, yeah, let's do this RH law thing. Doesn't that kind of just show that like that what they're doing in the government halls, in the laws that are like the conversations they're having against RH law are more these conversations are headed by a select few more than it is the majority of people. And it's just, I feel as though given the study, the media kind of turns the lens towards people who to make it out, I guess, that they're against comprehensive sex ed because people in power also control the media. But given the study, I think what's happening on the ground is different from what's happening up there. So I think that has a lot of implications on how sex, like, even a lot of people want sex ed, like what it still boils down to what people in power will want. And I think that's the saddest part about it.
Yeah, I think especially because a majority of our legislators are men, like they overlook a lot of especially the, people with vagina uterus aspect where they just simply don't give a shit, they don't want to have comprehensive sex ed because, part of that is consent and a lot of these people are terrible. So, they don't want people knowing their rights.
Right. Or they assume that like men's needs are the same as women's needs.
That being said, do we have anybody in the government right now who's, because correct me if I'm wrong, from what I've seen is that even some of our female legislators don't have also have sort of a backwards understanding of sexual and health rights, right? So they're not exactly pushing for forward policies. Is there anybody? Is there anybody in office right now, a legislator who's pushing for the right ones? Anybody to look out for? Who should we be listening to that you know of?
Well, obviously, any opinions we have on this show is, well, we're the hosts. We're now open, so I guess it is a now open endorsement, sort of. But there are some legislators who are pushing for the further implementation and the expansion of the RH law. Risa Hontiveros is one. I know Sara Elago in Congress as well. Some of the other female politicians eventually got there, but I'm not going to mention them because they have other policies that I feel are anti-women and are terrible. So I'm not going to say them. But yeah, those are at least the two off the top of my head that I can think of who are pushing. So there is some hope, but there's hundreds of people in Congress and Senate. And I don't know how many are women. I'm pretty sure it's like a very paltry amount. So,
Kai, is there anyone you like?
Risa Hontiveros for sure. I feel as though she's been pushing for a lot of laws that have been pro women, that have been very amenable to the LGBTQ plus. So for her, for sure.
All right. So after the break, we are going to come back with more about the local SRHR situation, which we've already touched on a little bit, but we're going to talk about the RH law and the Philippine situation a little bit more in depth. But first, we want to give some time to our weekly segment where we read your confessions or your questions on air. We have a form called Opening Up that I'll leave the link to in the comments. So if you have a question you want us to answer, if you want our advice on something, then this is the perfect place to do it. So
this is straight up my favorite part of the show.
Is it? Because you give the best advice, Joe Bim.
The best advice.
All right. So for today's opening up, we have this anonymous letter. I'm bisexual and Christian. Oof. But my parents are pastors. Oof. And completely see being queer as disgusting and unnatural, no exaggeration. They say they love me, they just hate the sin. But what
it
they
just
don't
gets worse and worse.
I know, it's just every sentence is like, oof. But what they don't understand is that my sexuality is a large part of me and is my identity. I don't expect them to understand this, but I'm 24/7 torn with how to live my own life, yet have a healthy relationship with my parents who only mean well. Now open. This person actually says now open. I love it. Now open. Should I prioritize myself over my family? I don't think I can live without them, no matter how much I love being gay.
Damn. Oh,
yes.
Wow. Oh, baby.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So just a rundown of the facts in case it got lost. Bisexual and Christian, pastor parents who hate the sin. And what should this person do? Family? Should they prioritize themselves? How do you move on from this? So, I guess I have to make a couple of assumptions here. I think before we can answer this, I think one assumption is that you live with your parents, just because most people live with their parents. And, I'm assuming that's part of the decision making here, where it's like, will they kick me out if I live my life? Will they disown me? So there's that level of stability, which I think complicates the matter because I don't know. Normally I'd be like, fuck parents, because I also said that to my own parents when they didn't accept me. And I was also raised Catholic. went to a Catholic girls' school, and then eventually was like, fuck you and your God. I'm moving out and I'm living my best gay life. And not everyone has the privilege to do that. So I wouldn't recommend that for everyone. But before I give like my actual advice, do you have any insights, you guys, you want to share?
I remember in one episode with Jan Lee, in the trans violence episode, Jan Lee said something that really resonated with me. She goes, I think we underestimate the love that the people around us have for us. And I don't wanna, cause I'm in the same situation. Like, although I have come out, I'm not from a Christian family, but I'm from a quite conservative family. Although I have come out, it's still a process. But that's something I learned in my coming out, where it was like it's not just me, it's not just my process. Na parang I came out finally, just accept me, you know. Um, it's also it's also a process for the people you love. Na, you know, they have to come to terms with something that they did not expect. I mean, like, gets mo ba? Parang if you shift, if you put yourself in their shoes, they're also coming. They're trying to accept something, whereas you are trying to accept them or trying to understand them. So it's a two-way process. And you know, in my experience, I realized that Janly was right. Nah, sometimes you underestimate the love that the people have around for have for you, or that the people around you have for you. Like, the smallest things. Like when I came out, it was such a weird thing because it was like I was in such a toxic relationship, and it was super heavy. So I didn't think it would go good. But like a year later, like my tita bought me a guitar, like out of the blue, and she's like, I was trying to get you some rainbow guitar straps because it's LGBT, right? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, but this lady, she took all of them. I wanted to get some for you. And I'm like, oh wow. Little things like that, like it's such a slow process. But if you do say now, I take that you're from a Christian loving family. If you do say what you mean, they do love you and you love them. As the LGBT movement always says, love will always conquer. And at the end of the day, if your parents are your parents, you are their daughter or son. If the love really is there, and if they really do love you as you say they do, and you love them as you say you do, love will conquer, and it will go past the idea na it will go past the idea that you're bisexual. It goes down to the core that you're their daughter, your son, diba? And it'll really
Yeah.
take time. Ayun.
Yeah. Super agree with that. Like, it
Um,
took my mom a lot of time to get used to it. 10 years.
Well, they say
Sorry,
that
go
the
ahead.
opposite of love isn't hate, right? The opposite of love is fear, and it's because fear is the mind killer. Frank Herbert's Dune, and I think if I think you have a pretty good grasp of the situation with you and your parents, and I think you also have a very good grasp of your own identity. We're what I'm getting from the letter is that their main issue is their fear of what might happen, the fear of the change, the uncertainty. So for me, my advice would just be, how much are you willing to risk? How strong do you think you are right now in your life to face the coming challenges that might arise? The coming friction that might arise between you and your family, because if you have that strength in you right now, you can push forward and let them know. If you know you can fight, if you know you can stand toe to toe with your family and not get tired and not break down and not be consumed by it, then fucking fight, dude. Yeah, be yourself, stand up for yourself. But if you think that it's going to put undue pressure on yourself, then and you're fine living your truth because you're comfortable with it and you don't feel like you need your parents' approval right now, then I don't see the need for you to immediately push yourself out of your comfort zone if you're comfortable living the way you're living now. It's just a matter of conquering your fear, and that fear of change. How much are you willing to risk? How much are you willing to adjust for?
Definitely. Like, this is definitely going to be a tumultuous period.
For the both of you.
Yeah, for
Both
the both of
parties.
you, because like you're living there knowing that they don't accept your sexuality, and then they're working through their own issues. It's
Right.
going to be tumultuous. It's going to be difficult. It's a long process, but Okay, this is like my own personal take on it, because what I did when this happened to me was that I did prioritize myself. And for me, it was the best decision I could have done, because when I started prioritizing myself, obviously I was 18, I got a job, I left the house that I could no longer stand to be in. One of the biggest reasons for that was because of my sexuality. And I was able to do that because I knew that I wasn't changing. And at the time, my mother was not changing either. So I removed myself from the situation that was harming me. And I decided to live my life. Again, not everyone has that privilege, and not everyone wants to go fuck you to your family, right? I'm not a big family person, so I was able to do that. But when I did start prioritizing myself, I started living my life. I got a job. I was financially independent. That was when my mom and I started to repair our relationship, because we had distance. She saw that I was successful. She saw that I was happy, and she saw that I was not going to listen to her anyway. So she had a choice. She could either accept me and be in my life, or she could continue to not accept me and have nothing to, and I would have nothing to do with her. So,
so you have to be prepared for those consequences also.
Yeah. Obviously not everyone is willing to cut off their family. I was, again, for more reasons than just the sexuality part, but that was a big part. But when I started doing that, then my mom's love for me did shine through. She eventually realized that it was either she accepted this part of me or she lost me forever. So when she realized that, it helped. It's still not perfect, but we've gotten very, very far. And it took us 10 years to get there. Okay. I came out when I was 12, and I was like way, way older, way into my 20s by the time she accepted me. So it might be a long journey. But if you're willing to go through it, and if you can, love yourself and stand up for yourself,
it's a journey worth taking.
Yes, you will be happy. It beats the alternative, which is to stay in the closet for the rest of your life with your family, and that kind of sucks too. So it really depends on what you're willing to take, what kind of shit you're willing to take, and what you're willing to do to be happy and be yourself. So yeah. I hope we answered our anonymous writer's question, and I hope they're listening now so that they can get the answer to
the question. We have eased the burden on your soul.
And hey, if it's still difficult with your family, know that one of the best things about being LGBTQ is your chosen family. So if your family won't cut it, then you can choose your own family. And I hope that now open, we can be a part of your family. So, we'll support you. And
families
we'll
like
you.
Pokemon. You catch them, you collect them, they evolve. They're fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, I gotta bow out early, you guys.
He's a
enjoy the rest
man.
of the yes. I'm a corporate slave. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the episode. I'm sure you guys are gonna have a lot of fun.
All right. Bye, Jabim.
Bye, Jabim.
All right, with that, I just want to promote our coffee. If you like the work that we do, which I hope you do because you're watching, you can support the podcast by going to our coffee page. You can do a one-time donation, and we really super appreciate it. But if you want extra stuff, extra content, access to an exclusive community Discord channel, a personalized thank you video from one of the hosts, and a monthly hangout with other loyal customers, then you can subscribe to our coffee. It's only 150 pesos a month, but it means so much to us. And we're really ramping up the content on there. We're going to be doing one bonus episode a month for our paid subscribers. So if you want to support us and get in on that, then our coffee link is in the comments. I also want to say super, super thank you to Trish, who is our first loyal customer. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Trish. Seriously, the Trishas of the world really get shit done. All right, so let's get on with the rest of the show. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about SRHR as a general concept, and we touched on a little bit how it applies to the Philippines. So Kai, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the current situation? How are we doing? Are we awful?
All right, so there are 3 legislations that have to do with SRHR in the Philippines thus far. So the first is the Philippine HIV/AIDS Policy Act. Now, the key features of this act are the mature minor doctrine. So unlike the RH law, you don't need to have consent to get tested. I mean, you'll need to have parental consent to get tested. So you can be like, as long as you're 15 and older, you can get tested. Am I correct? I'm not sure. But alam ko that you don't need to have parental consent to get tested because getting tested for HIV is voluntary. And to get that done, you don't have to have parental consent. More than that, testing for HIV is part of prenatal care. So every time you get like a prenatal care package at a hospital, or like every time you like get to an OB and you have to get tested, you get tested right away for HIV. And more than that, treatment is free. So this policy act, this HIV/AIDS policy act, is honestly a really good law. But the issues that come with it have to do with implementation.
Of
So
course.
even though even though the law is a really good law, and discrimination on the grounds of your status as HIV or not, or as a person living with HIV or not, discrimination on that basis is not allowed under this law. However, it still happens. Like there have been a lot there, even though this law exists, there's just one case of this healthcare worker who, upon learning that he was positive, his superiors were like, "Hey, take a break. We'll come back na lang when you feel better." When he did, they were like, "No, we can't take you back anymore." So, like that's just one instance of how implementation of this law is really just a little messy, because not a lot of people. I think the problem here, Trisha, is that like the ways the laws are written are so inaccessible to
Yes.
so many people, diba? Na
Literally,
parang,
the entire legal profession is just there to confuse you. That's why we
exactly.
need lawyers, because we
It's
can't
such a shit
understand
show.
it.
Exactly. Like I would love to like defend myself in court or some shit, but I can't do that. I can't even take the first fucking step because I can't. At least I mean, like not everyone can read like laws and understand them. Right? Especially think about it. Like, what if you're like, if you don't speak English, like how are you gonna understand the laws that affect you, diba? So,
Right, like the two of us, we're
mm,
English speakers, we're college
right.
educated. I'd like to think we're voracious readers. We can understand
Mm-hmm,
slightly more dense, complex language than the
mm-hmm,
average
mm-hmm.
person, but I cannot read us like anything. I can't read anything that comes out in like the penal code or whatever. I just don't get it. I just
Right.
ask my lawyer friends because it's completely
Exactly.
inaccessible.
Because the jargon, especially the jargon they have surrounding these laws, is like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it's fucked up because it's like these laws affect all of us, but then we can't understand them. So how are we going to practice and
Yeah.
know our rights, diba? So
So, do
that
you
this
think
also,
with
yeah,
implementation, it's like the companies or the institutions that are God, I was gonna say making labag the law, ang puta, sobrang konyo. The companies that are violating the HIV/AIDS Policy Act, do you think they're doing it because they just don't know that it's illegal now?
honestly, I don't think it's actually the institutions. I think it's more of the people on the ground. The people conducting the test, for example. There are cases where it's like kids, or like mga young kids, like mga 12, mga 15-year-olds ganon. They'd want to like get tested. But then the person testing is like, where are your parents? Where's your legal guardian? Even though that's not needed, because they have the
Mm.
mature minor doctrine. The mature minor doctrine nga says that even you don't need parental consent to get tested, even though you're a minor. So, even though that does exist, at the level of implementation, at the level of like the healthcare workers in the barangays, the level of, you know, um, different workers on the ground, a lot of what is in this law is not understood. So I think that's one of the biggest issues of the Philippine HIV/AIDS Act. But it's a
Yeah,
very good law. It's just that we need to make it more accessible. That's the thing with the Philippine legal system. We have such great laws, to be honest.
we do
Great laws. We
some.
honestly have really good laws. You have some good laws. Like Irish is honestly a good law, even though it's like it has some shitty parts in it. But then like it's a good law. It's a good law. The same way like we've had a lot of like we've moved forward with a lot of our laws. Before women weren't allowed to work at night. That's not a law anymore. Like that's okay. So we've moved forward with a lot of things. It's just, bro, hindi namin maintindihan. So like, how are we going to practice this shit? We have good laws. It's just we
Honestly,
don't, diba? We just
Philippine
can't
government
practice
really
it.
shit at strategy and really shit at implementation. Honestly, like I agree with
Communicate. You
you.
communicate,
And
diba? Okay,
messaging
go.
is so bad here. We don't know how to
Mm-mm,
message and
mm-mm.
communicate. And like
Exactly.
I agree with you because like this law, especially when you compare it to something like the U.S., right? Well, the U.S. has really shitty laws in general, but
Mm,
for them, treatment is not free, and their healthcare system is super fucked. So PrEP is
mhm.
really expensive. I
Exactly.
also know that under this law, it's illegal to out someone, out their
Yes.
status, which is
Exactly.
amazing. But I, aside from implementation, I think one of the biggest roadblocks is still stigma. Like a lot of people still have the
Yes.
stigma.
Yes.
Like I, there was something happening really recently, sort of recently. I don't know what time is on Twitter, where somebody died. A prominent gay person died, and there were lots of people asking, including people from within the community, asking, "Oh, was it AIDS? Was it AIDS?" And it's just like,
What?
oh my god, the level of stigma that there is, especially for gay men. You know,
Mm-mm,
anytime
mm-mm.
anytime a gay man dies, oh, was it AIDS? Was it related to AIDS? And you
Right.
know, we just have still a lot of assumptions that we make about people who have HIV. We still either feel pity or
There's a lot of
disgust at them.
misinformation. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of misinformation surrounding the experience of being PL HIV. Like, for example, like a lot of people still thinking that HIV from kissing. Wait, you can't.
I mean,
Like
you
the
can if
only
you have
way
like mega mouth sores,
if you have huge sores, but then gets mo ba?
which you
Parang on a
should get that
regular,
checked.
exactly. But if you have like a regular like fucking mouth and it's a healthy mouth, you know, because like the virus dies when it gets in contact with air. So like when you're making out, it's a very low risk situation. And the highest risk the most risky ways to get HIV is from blood, semen, or breast milk. Those are like the three main ways you can get HIV. But other
That's
than
why they do
that,
it as
like,
part of prenatal care now, because if the
mm-hmm,
mother
mm-hmm.
has HIV, then the kid, when they breastfeed, are going to get HIV as well.
Exactly.
Oh.
Uh-huh. More than the Philippine HIV/AIDS Act, there is also, like I said, the RH law. So now let's talk a little bit more about the RH law and what it's really about. So RH law, hold up, let me grab my. Okay, here. So the main aspect of the RH law that are really just the great things about it. First, it provides information and access regarding family planning, and we really need that. We really, really need that. There is RH support for adolescents, reproductive health care. There's this parts about elimination of GBV or gender-based violence, education, men's reproductive health and responsibilities is talked about there. Even the mental health aspect of reproductive health. But as we talked about earlier, we talked about sex ed, parental consent, abortion. We've covered those things. But one more thing that's um, kind of shitty about the RH law is how it's really just focused on heterosexual couples. Um,
I wonder why. Look at our
I wonder
legislators.
why. Bakit kaya? But yeah, the RH law is focused only on heterosexual couples. So the sexual right to freely choose our partners is not supported by the RH law. Because the family code has been such a big thing for this. Family code in the Philippines does not recognize same-sex couples. And the thing is, and because they don't recognize same-sex couples, they don't serve the needs of LGBT families. But in 2015, there was this gay lawyer named Jesus. Just I don't know if it's Jesus or Jesus, but Jesus Falacis. He filed a case in the Supreme Court arguing that the family code in the Philippines was unconstitutional precisely because it's limited to cisgendered heterosexual couples, married cisgender heterosexual couples.
Oh no, absolutely. I
And
agree. The family code is so
mhm,
outdated. I did a report
so
on
fucking
it
outdated, dude.
in
Mhm,
college, and I can't remember
mhm.
because that was several years ago. But one thing I distinctly remember as part of the family code at the time was that there were even still laws regarding, like, if you're a wife and you and your husband have a fight, it's still the husband who has the last say. And I'm like,
Yeah,
this is a report I did in like 2012, and it's like, oh my
exactly.
god, I hope that's gone
It's such
now.
a fucking outdated law. Like, it's such an outdated law. And like, there's a House Bill 5695. It recognizes and gives rights to couples in civil partnerships, and this was filed in 2017. But the RH law only recognizes legal spouses to found the family and not couples in civil partnerships.
Boo.
Also, sadly, 2015, Jesus Spouses filed that case in the Supreme Court saying this family code is not right because it's only for cis-het people. Just last year, in Jan 2020, the Supreme Court junked it with the finality on the case that
Supreme Court.
Yeah, done. They junked it with finality on the basis that it lacks legal standing. So,
and it lacks legal standing because we don't have an anti-discrimination bill. We are not protected. So it's like, then create the fucking laws, you assholes. But you know what? I understand. The Supreme Court doesn't write laws. They merely uphold them. But fuck it anyway.
Exactly, right? And going back to what you were saying, anti-discrimination bill. That's an amazing law that we fucking need. So first off, it serves protection against SOGI-based discrimination. So if someone does any like hate crimes, any gender-based violence, and on the basis of SOGI, or the basis of your SOGI, like for example, not allowing a trans woman in the woman's bathroom, or even same-sex domestic abuse. This bill, if passed into law, could protect you. More than that, it explains discriminatory practices against relating to SOGI, plus their penalties. So it gives a rundown of the different discriminatory practices that are penalized under this law or this bill. And what I find cute about this also, it calls for the empowering media portrayal of the LGBTQ+, which I feel is such a fucking breath of fresh air. Because I mean, like we just had an episode this 2 weeks ago on queer representation, diba? In cinema. Or no. Yep. Telling queer stories. And this bill is such it calls for that. It calls for good and healthy queer representation. And it also has social protection programs and diversity trainings for LGUs. So it's pretty. It really serves the LGBTQ+ community, and that's also the reason why a lot of cis-het men in power are saying no, because they're saying this bill could possibly put the LGBTQ+ above everyone else. But the problem there is they don't realize that everyone has SOGI. Straight
people have SOGI.
Straight people have SOGI. Cis-het people have SOGI. Cis-het is a SOGI in itself. And that's going back to what I was saying about like the RH law study. A lot of people have been opposed to it precisely because they don't understand it. And going back to what I was saying, maybe because these laws are so hard to read, but also they're in fucking power. They should be able to read this shit. They have a team to read this shit for them. Anyway.
Well, honestly, I feel like a lot of them are like, what happened with the RH law was that a lot of people were scared it would lead to abortion rights. Which honestly, not a bad thing. That would be the best thing actually, but the law had nothing about abortion. And in the same way, a lot of people, especially church, religious people, and politicians who still want to curry favor with the church, they were against the anti-discrimination bill because they thought it was a slippery slope to gay marriage, which again, not a bad thing, but also not a part of the anti-discrimination bill. So it's a lot of no's from people who didn't even read the fucking thing. They're contesting parts that aren't even included in the bill, and it's just like, read the fucking shit. Like if we can take the time to understand it, you should.
Exactly. And more than that, like the thing is that from the RH law, abortion, from the anti-discrimination bill, it's gay marriage. You see how these two things are also like issues that the church are so against. You could really see how like the church really is a part of our legal system, even though it shouldn't be. Now, religious values come into play in even our legal system, which is supposed to be objective, diba?
Separation of church and state is in our constitution, but in implementation, again, the issue.
Exactly. And that's so fucking stupid. You know, parang like they're gonna say na okay, it's not like when Jesus Falses filed that thing against the family code. Like, it's unconstitutional. But when they put church values into every single thing in our legal system, it's not it's constitutional. It's like I'm so frustrated, sis.
Mm-hmm.
It's so frustrating. It's like, so it's only unconstitutional if it's against what you want, but it's constitutional even though it isn't when you want it. Is
Oh
that
no, that's
how this
absolutely
shit
how the
works?
government operates.
Fucking
There's no
shit, dude. Like
question. You see it how they handled the COVID pandemic. You see it how it happens with
oh my
everything. It's
goodness.
just like it's all about me and nothing about anybody else. So fuck this government.
Exactly.
All right, so we're nearing the end of our episode on sexual and reproductive health and rights. Bam, I got it in one go. All right.
All those ends.
So many syllables. All right, so Kai, what is your main takeaway from tonight's episode?
My main takeaway is really that there's a lot of work to be done in the field of SRHR, especially in the Philippine context. You know, and more, even though it's an essential bundle of rights that people should know about and practice, that there are still people in power that, or we're in contexts of power dynamics where we can't practice those rights and those and we can't have a healthy practice of those rights because people in power are saying no. And that just goes to show there's a lot of work to be done in this realm of sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Absolutely.
What did you learn?
I don't know. My main takeaway is something I've always known. The biggest obstacle to our progress, especially in the field of SRHR. So the biggest obstacle to any progress in SRHR and everything else is really the government. So if you want to change things, make some fucking noise. You know, go to protests, donate to full-time activists, mag-ingay sa Twitter, just make all the noise that you can, because part of the government is hundreds of people, maybe a couple thousand if you take all three branches into consideration, but there's millions of Filipinos. There's 100+ million of us. And if all of us collectively put our voices together and we let them know what we want and what we're demanding from them as people on our payroll, they're being paid by our taxes, then they have really no choice to listen to us. And if they don't listen to us, burn the whole thing to the ground. Aus Duterte. That's my main takeaway. All right. So looks like I'm alone for some reason, but that's really the end of the podcast. So thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Just want to say bye to our customers who tuned in. We got Trisha, Ruth, Chi, Renzo, Nick, Hannah, Alice, Lex. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you really enjoyed this episode and that you learned something and that we stoked the fires of rage within you, because something has to change. We can't keep on keeping on this way because women, children, men, LGBTQ, everyone is affected by this. So make motherfucking noise. All right. Kai, do you want to promote your personal social accounts?
All right. That's XOXCAI on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am at Trisha O'Bannon on Twitter. You can follow me there for cat pictures and mostly cat pictures.
Mojo.
Okay. So if you want
happy
more
birthday,
of
Mojo, by the way.
Yes.
Birthday,
oh yes, it was my cat's
Mojo.
birthday over the weekend. I can't believe I didn't mention that during the check-in, but it was his birthday. So say happy birthday to our cat. So I hope that you really enjoyed this episode and that you want to see more from Now Open, because if you do, you can check out our past videos on Facebook, where you are at Now Open PH. We also are pretty active on Twitter, also Now Open PH. And for off days, if you just want to hang out, we have the Discord channel. I left the link in the comments. It's also in the description. So if you're listening at home, you can click on the episode description to get to the Discord channel. And if you want to listen to our past episodes on Spotify, we have 18 clean-ish recordings currently uploaded on the Spotify, and we will be uploading more in the coming months. So watch out for that. right, before we end officially this episode, we've been forgetting to do the sex assignments for several weeks because I don't know. So we're going to pick a new sex assignment out of the hat. And okay, everyone, please, if you did the sex assignment, let us know how it went. It can be totally anonymous. And of course, the hosts have to do it because we've been bad at that as well. All right, so next week's sex assignment is come up with a threesome list.
What is a threesome list? Like
So
like 2 people you want to have sex with?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So you come up with a list of people that you would have threesomes with.
Did it have to be famous?
No, it can be people in your life. It can be, you know, your partner plus a clone of your partner. It could be literally anything. Just, you know, kind of let your imagination run wild. It can be a dead person. I mean, like obviously an alive version of them. You know, it could be an animated character. You know, anybody that you kind of want to bang in a threesome. Make your threesome list. And it can have multiple.
I would like me and my partner. I'd like a clone of me and I'd like a clone of me and plus my girlfriend. I'd like to fuck myself.
Absolutely.
Is that masturbation? I don't know.
Yeah, is it?
Is it masturbation?
Right. All right. So next week, the hosts will be sharing our threesome lists. And if you want to share your threesome list with us, please do. All right. So that is it for tonight's episode of Now Open on sexual and reproductive health and rights. But don't worry, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Our next episode is to be announced. We're just confirming some details, but if everything goes according to plan, we're going to have a really exciting episode for you next week. So stay tuned for the announcement on our Twitter and our Facebook, and see y'alls when we next open.